Scituate's annual election is May 20th in that high school gym from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. And like years past, only one race is contested, that school committee, between Maria Fenwick and Richard Taft. Maria Fenwick may be a new face of that school committee race, but she's no stranger to education. She's a former teacher, and she's worked in the nonprofit sector helping teachers across the state. If elected, Maria says she'll do extensive research on topics and listen to all voices to make an informed decision. This is Meet the Candidate with Maria Fenwick for Scituate School Committee. Maria Fenwick, I want to start with two thank yous. First, thank you for being here and agreeing to do this interview. I know you're busy. And number two, thank you for running. We need more people getting involved. That's been a topic of conversation. I think when you look at this ballot, it can be a little sad sometimes, so thank you very much. I know you're a busy woman. I want to get straight to this. Maria Fenwick, why the school committee? Why now?
Well, first of all, Seth, thank you so much for having me and for doing this forum. I think it is really important, especially as we don't have a local newspaper anymore. This is a great way to just help people learn about the candidates, so thank you. So I am running for school committee because education is my lifelong passion. It's been my career for the past 20 plus years. So I started off with getting my master's degree in education policy and management. I went from there into teaching. I got a second master's degree in elementary education, and I taught second and fourth grade in the Boston Public Schools for 7 years. From there, I transitioned into the nonprofit sector. I was the founding executive director at a nonprofit that works with teachers, getting them involved in policy-making decisions. I did some independent consulting and worked with DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. A lot of my work really centered around recognizing teachers, amplifying their voices, helping them be seen as real experts, and thinking about how to create teacher leadership roles that will entice our best and brightest teachers to stay in the classroom for longer. In 2017, I founded a nonprofit organization of my own called the Teacher Collaborative. So we work with teachers across Massachusetts, connecting them, supporting them through professional development, and again, really helping them learn from one another and take ownership of the expertise and success they've had in their classrooms. So I'm now the executive director of that organization, and I think throughout my entire career, I've been really fortunate to have worked with awesome teachers from a broad variety of schools. I've been in lots and lots of schools, and I've gotten to really see some very creative and innovative approaches to education. I also, with my background in policy, I like to read about education news, and I think all of this really prepares me for, the types of things that the school committee would be doing here in Scituate. And then I think to pair with that locally, I've done a lot of volunteer work in our schools since moving here in 2017. I've been a class parent. I've been involved with PTO. I am on the school council at Hatherley. I have done all the different, opportunities for parent input at the district level, being involved in the visioning committee. I was involved in the, from a parent perspective, in the hiring of both our superintendent and our assistant superintendent, actually, and the DEI director. And I was on the hiring committee for the METCO director as well. So I feel as though those two things really well prepare me. And lastly, I'll add, I have a real personal investment. I have 3 children. One will be attending Gates next year. He's been at Hatherley. My daughter is still at Hatherley, and then I've got a little one who is 3, but will be in kindergarten before we know it.
There was a vacancy on that school committee after a former member stepped down.
Yes.
That vacancy was just to fill the last 2 meetings of that school committee before this upcoming election.
Yes.
However, there were 5 people that did apply for that position, your opponent included.
Yep.
You did not. Why?
That's right. So timing, honestly, if that position had become available before the election had kicked off, I would have absolutely put my name in the hat and I would have gone forward with that. I actually emailed both the school committee and the select board members to let them know my rationale for not putting my name in, which was that I just felt it was unfair to ask them to publicly weigh in on a candidate during an election season. I felt that just puts them in an awkward position, and I didn't see an upside to that. However, I will say I attended the meeting at which they chose the replacement, and I was at the last school committee meeting, and I'll be at the next one. So while I am not officially on the school committee in that capacity, I'm as involved as I ever have been, which is a lot. I go to a lot of those meetings.
You were at that last school committee meeting in which the superintendent unveiled his big state of the district.
Yep.
It was lengthy.
Yep.
We can nitpick it all we want. I guess let's just kind of do a basic overview.
Sure.
For you, the state of the district.
Yeah. So I think Scituate Public Schools is doing well by a number of measures. I think, we are a solid district in the highest performing state in our nation. We are not one of the absolute top districts in Massachusetts, but I think we are on the upswing, and I think we need to stay the course. Since I've been involved in Scituate, we have a lot of new leadership at the district level. We have new building leaders. We have adopted new curricula that I think is, setting us on a better path. There's more consistency in the elementary schools. All of those things matter, and I think all of those things are going to help us go from good to great.
You come up with that because of the facts and data they give you, and this always comes up in those school committee meetings.
Yes.
They want facts, data to back everything up.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're being provided with enough?
I mean, I think the school committee in general is provided with a lot. Is it enough? I mean, probably. I'm not sure what enough would mean. I think the school committee is charged with holding the district accountable, supporting them to make progress towards their goals. The school committee is always going to have a somewhat limited perspective just because they are not in classrooms, they're not in schools, they're in this volunteer capacity. So I think data is essential. We have to know, we have to be able to see, are we seeing progress? Are we seeing lines moving upward? When we're not, why not? And do the people who are charged with actually carrying out the work feel as though they have an adequate plan and the right resources that they need in order to figure out, how to make progress?
Sure. I want to, because you're a teacher, I kind of want to just ask you about teachers in general. I didn't put this on your list, but because you are a former one, what do you think makes a good teacher?
I think teaching is an extraordinarily difficult job.
Right.
Teachers will say teaching is an art and a science. You have to both be very skilled at your subject area and also be able to read the room, form relationships with kids, help kids understand why learning matters. All of those things kind of go into being a good teacher. And also, you have to be really reflective. Teaching is different every year, even every day. You're working with so many variables. It's new kids. It might be new curriculum. It might be new colleagues. It might be a new school leader. Things are changing all the time. Then there's, society at large, what's happening in the news and in the world. All of these things are coming into the classroom every day. And so as a teacher, you have to be constantly willing to reflect on how things are going, how can you improve, and be a lifelong learner. And all teachers will say, yes, I'm a lifelong learner. That's part of the job.
At the candidate forum, school committee member Janice Lindblom brought up the importance of real life skills, and I couldn't agree with this more. The school has I believe it was the high school at least, has a program, and it's called Credit for Life, and I believe a teacher, Joe Pumphrey, started it. And it is essentially what students do. They go in, they pick a job they want, they find out their salary, then they discover all the things that cost money, food, rent, cars, and they're blown away. I mean, so when we think about, obviously there's academics, but within the school system, do you think there are enough real life skills being taught?
Probably not enough, but I think we're doing a lot. Like I know that there are, there's robotics, there's kids out doing internships, there's ways that kids are connecting with the environment and science. I think there's a lot going on. I also know that all teachers strive to really make their content relevant. So just because you're learning geometry, it doesn't mean that it needs to be test prep geometry. There are ways that can really be done creatively that help kids to see the relevance and help them feel like they're not just learning, the basics, but they're actually learning something that will apply. I know Gates is a model in our state for project-based learning. That's a model that really takes that head on and says, how can we make things more interdisciplinary so that kids are not, I'm in math, so I'm doing math, and now I'm in social studies, so I'm doing social studies. How can we help kids really take their knowledge from one place and bring it to another place in a way that feels really exciting and new to them?
I want to talk briefly about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And a lot of people come up to me before these interviews and say, ask about critical race theory, ask about gender issues, ask about sexual orientation. And I feel like those, what I told everyone is I feel like that warrants it's the lengthy discussion.
Yes.
And it's all individualized depending on who you are. So I encourage them, of course, to reach out to the candidates one-on-one, have that discussion. I will say this. The majority of individuals that asked me, I would say, skewed more conservative. And it appeared as though they felt as though they just weren't being heard. So when we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and really that inclusion part, do you think the conservative voice is being included in the conversation?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, schools are nonpartisan places, and teachers are well trained to not bring their own personal politics into the classroom. Teachers instead are trained to equip students with the skills that they need to look at information, look at different perspectives, analyze it, draw their own conclusions, be able to back up their conclusions. Like, those are the skills that teachers are really focusing on, not so much, trying to get all students to believe a certain way. So I think that is one thing that's important to state. I think in terms of parents being listened to, I think, first of all, there are ways for parents to exempt their child. Parents do have that right to say, you know what, I don't think this book or this topic is appropriate for my own child, and I would prefer that my child does not do that. And teachers are prepared to have an alternative for that child. I will say I've talked to some folks in the district, and there have actually been 0 requests for that this year. And I think that speaks to the ability of teachers to really know what they're doing. They are experts. They understand how to choose materials and drive conversations in the way that I described previously, that are really focused on skill development. And I will also add, in terms of parents being heard, I know that some parents feel, or they might feel, afraid. They are unsure of what their child is encountering in school. And I think the best resource they have in that case is first the teacher, and say, hey, you know what, I'd like to know more about this. And the teacher will happily sit down, or they should happily sit down and say, okay, let me show you, the way that we teach that, or the way that we're explaining the materials that we're using. If parents are not getting a satisfactory answer from the teacher, they should then go to the school leader, who should similarly be equipped to answer their questions. And if not, they should escalate that up to the school committee, to the superintendent. And yes, they should expect a response. I think that is a basic function of people in leadership in school districts, is that they need to be able to answer questions. And I know that many times they do. I also know there are some parents who report that they're not getting their questions answered. And so clearly that's a place for improvement.
Matt Brown is a well-known cartoonist here in town, sometimes controversial.
Yep.
He did post this that said, in Scituate it takes all kinds, but on election day, May 20th, you get to decide which kind.
Yes.
Do you care to comment on this?
Sure. I mean, I think, political cartoons are meant to evoke an emotional response. And so I think what this is trying to show is a really polarized view between myself and my opponent. I think, a number of years ago, you wouldn't have known the politics of a person running for a town position. That's not part of, I'm not running as a particular party. None of my opponents are. And in the past, you might not have known, how I vote or how my opponent votes. I think that this is something that's happening all over the place now. There's just more polarization than there used to be. There's more conversation. And I think in a political cartoon, you're going to see something that is meant to evoke a response. Clearly, there are many people that would consider themselves somewhere in the middle between those two.
When students are involved in incidents online with racism, sexism, but it happens outside school territory, how involved, if at all, do you think the school administration should get?
So I actually think that according to our state law, they have to be involved when those actions that are happening outside of school are making a child is reporting feeling unsafe in school. So if something is happening online in the evening, but the next morning, everyone's talking about it, then it's here. And unfortunately, the school has to then deal with it. I say unfortunately because this obviously detracts from their main job, focusing on learning, but this is a reality, and it's something that's being felt everywhere. And I think that schools are learning that they have to be ready to educate parents on social media, what's out there, how to set boundaries with your kids. Like, parents obviously have a role in this, but I think schools are in that position where they need to educate parents, they need to educate students and be really clear with them on what the boundaries are and what are the consequences when those boundaries are crossed, so that kids are aware that, just because you said something on the weekend on social media, it doesn't mean no one's going to find out on Monday. In fact, the purpose of social media is that everyone's going to find out.
Right.
And so, again, though, it is the school's absolute job to make sure that kids are safe, and kids that are not feeling safe in school are not going to be able to learn.
It is about school and the students, but at the end of the day, it also is a business, which includes a budget, a very lengthy budget. Sometimes I ask about what you focus on and all of that, and we could go through that, but I'm wondering this: with any business, there are always going to have to be budget cuts. If the school administration went to the school committee and said, look, we need some guidance on where we should focus, what would you say?
Well, the largest portion of our district, and really of many districts, most districts' budgets, is the people, the teachers, the school administrators, central office administrators, and that is how it should be. We know research is very clear that the teacher is the most important school-based resource in terms of student outcomes, and second to them are the school leaders. And so I would want to definitely preserve our teachers and preserve our ability to professionally develop those teachers and hold on to them, retain them, because that's also a cost savings. Anytime we don't have to hire a new teacher, anytime we can continue to benefit from a teacher's talents that we have invested in. So I think that's something I would want to keep. I think, what happens in these situations more often than not is that you end up cutting from something like physical maintenance of schools, which is also not a situation we want to be in, because we know that then that becomes a huge burden for taxpayers, for the town, to think about, and we're in that position now with the possibility of a new school. I know the district has done, I've been at the last few budget hearings, and I think they've done a really good job actually with thinking about resource allocation. And I know they've been setting aside more money than they used to for things like repairs, and starting to think really proactively about how to make sure that our physical spaces, stay in that we're taking care of them as best as we can.
Communication has been a big priority for the school administration in a number of ways. But what about the school committee? What role do you think the school committee should play in public relations?
I think the school committee has definitely a role to play in public relations, and I actually think they're doing a very good job of that so far. I think they've started to post summaries of their meetings. They share them via email, but also on the app that most parents use, and they will have a summary of the main things that were discussed, any decision points, and then they usually will link out to presentations and materials that were shared. I think that's awesome. I mean, I think the fact that the meetings are able to be attended in person or virtually or live streamed on Facebook or watched after the fact is also awesome. That just opens up so much more access for people to know what's going on at these meetings. I think, I know the school committee members spend a good bit of time responding to parent emails. It's not just what you're seeing when they're in meetings. There's a lot more behind the scenes work that goes on as well, and I know a good portion of that is communications.
Communications also happen on social media, and I've seen at least two of the school committee members weigh in on some social media groups when they feel that information is just incorrect, or there needs to be more clarity to it. Do you think school committee members should be commenting in social media groups or stay within their own sort of public profile pages?
Yeah, I think, as we discussed earlier with kids, social media is part of our world, and I think it is up to the school committee member themselves the degree to which that they get involved. I do think correcting with factual information is actually can be really valuable. I think I've seen on social media sometimes conversations can just spin out, and in fact, if someone had just been able to step in and say, actually, this is why, or the number is this, it would just prevent a lot of that, drama and upheaval that can happen. So I think that, for better or for worse, it's here. And if some members feel comfortable weighing in and providing those facts, I think it can actually be helpful.
One more question about that school committee.
Sure.
Their meeting format. There's been a lot of discussion about this, and the format being that public comment once at the beginning.
Yep.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that was to make it easier for people who want to come and comment publicly. When it was at the end of the meeting, you never quite knew when it was coming, sometimes an hour, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, sometimes more. And so that was unpredictable. I think having it at the beginning, if you want to comment, you're going to join the meeting right away. You're going to be there. You can comment from home. You can comment from being live. So I think that's all good. I understand that some people are unsatisfied, and this makes sense with the public comment format in general, in that it is not a Q&A. It is not like, I'm here with a question and I'd like you to answer me now. It is a time, and a limited time for you as a member of the community to say your piece, and then it's very unsatisfying. You don't get a response. And so I think that is probably the bigger problem, as opposed to when it occurs within the meeting, is that people are looking for a response. And so I think public comment can be helpful if you want to make more than just the school committee aware of your point. But otherwise, I think email is a great alternative, and then it's much easier for people to respond. They can actually read your question, figure out what they need, and then get back to you in the same format. So it's not a perfect system. It's not designed by our school committee. That is the kind of broader guidance said that this is common in all school committees. So it's not like it's something that our school committee has decided has to be this way. It is not in their hands.
So listen, I usually wrap up these interviews with some student voices, and that I go out and I get a camera and I interview the students. Unfortunately, due to schedule, I couldn't make it happen. But what I want to do with you is I want to recycle what I used last year. Okay. And so I go to elementary schools and I go to high schools and I just get some kids. The elementary schools the kids always want to know this from the candidates.
Okay.
They want to know, when you were in elementary school, who was one of your favorite elementary school teachers?
Hands down, Mrs. Dempsey, 4th grade.
Why?
Oh gosh, she was just kind of wacky, fun, creative. I remember some of the projects we did. I know one of them that comes to mind, we had to work in a small group and develop our own island, and we could name it and think about what was on it. I'm sure, looking back now, the lesson was probably about, commerce and landforms and things like that. So we could, do we want a river? And if we have a town, where will it be? So just, she really allowed our creativity to come through. I also remember that she threw a pool party at the end of the school year for all of us, which was very much over above and beyond. But I think she really let us get to know her as a person. She was funny. She had a great sense of humor about us as kids. And having taught 4th grade, I can say that's one of my favorite ages, because it's when you can start to make jokes in the classroom. Yeah. The kids are right there with you. They get it, and everyone laughs. So yeah, that Mrs. Dempsey.
When I ask high schoolers the same question, they always say, ask them what their worst class was in high school. And I say, well, if you're going to ask the worst, you got to ask the best.
Okay.
So, high school, best class for you.
AP US History 1 with Mr. Meyer. Yep. His passion for the subject was so clear. And I think he, similar to my 4th grade experience, helped us to really get excited about the content. I think AP US History is probably a lot different now than it was then, but we did a lot with primary sources, and that was really a time where you felt like you weren't just reading someone else's interpretation of history in a textbook. You were asked to read original documents and make your own interpretations and put together, different original sources, and that, I think, felt exciting. Good.
Do you have a worst class? Or one maybe you struggled with?
I didn't love chemistry. I'll put it that way.
Chemistry, good to know. I'm going to throw this. The high schoolers always ask me this too, and I'm like, I'm not asking that, but I'm going to do it anyway. They always say, ask them what their high school GPA was. You know it?
I don't.
Is that a lie?
No. I was in the National Honor Society.
Look at you. Good for
I know
you.
that.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if I remember mine either.
Yeah.
At any rate, listen, I know you're busy. I want to get you out of here, but thank you very much for doing this.
Thank
and
you
once
so much.
again,
That was
thank you
great.
for running. I
Yes.
appreciate it. I appreciate it. And remember, folks, that election is May 20th, high school gym from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.